Hello, welcome to this new video. This time I want to continue on a previous video that I created on how to test and crack RDP passwords using Hydra. The reason why I want to create this follow-up video is for you to have a much better understanding of some security measures that you can take to prevent such type of attacks. Now, if you didn't watch that video, go back to my channel and find that video testing and cracking RDP passwords with Hydra. Or better yet, I'm gonna leave a link on the comments section for you to take a look at it. Now, as I have mentioned before, I have seen over and over how administrators and even regular users, they do RDP port forwarding, or they just have RDP wide open on their servers and computers. And I have seen at least two, actually three separate instances where RDP services have been exploded and the servers have been infected by ransomware. Now, that was not my configuration. It just so happens that they called me after the fact, but it is there. So if we're going to use or if we're going to open RDP, make sure that you have many security layers on top of it to protect your system. And this that I have right here is just simply the result of that previous command where we exploited the RDP using Hydra, and we used a dictionary attack to find the password of a user on the remote computer. Now, what I have here now is another Windows 11 computer. This is the computer that I just tested on. And as you could see, I was able to find the password. And the same thing, if I do a password spray, I'm going to be able to find the user because I have the lists with the information that I'm looking for. So, in here, there's something that I want to show you. There are certain things that you can do to enhance the security of your system. Depending on your budget, depending on where you are, and depending if you are a regular user, meaning just your personal computer, or maybe one or two computers, or if you're part of an organization and you manage a larger network, most likely you're going to have different resources for you to utilize. You're going to have IPS, IDS, you're going to have network monitoring, you're going to have a WAF, you're going to have a whole bunch of things. But this is for those who have basic configurations and is also applicable to more advanced configurations. So one of the first things that I would advise you to do if you're using RDP is to change the port number, the listening port. As you can see now, the default port on Windows computer or the default port for RDP is 3389 TCP and UDP 3389. So you can change that to any port that you would like to change that to. So if I come here to my host and I do netstat -a, you are gonna see that 3389 is in a listening state. So 3389 is a well-known port that usually when attackers are looking for RDP, they're gonna be looking specifically for 3389. So if you change the listening port to something else, that's gonna, at least to an extent, help you. I mean, there are still ways to find out what port a service is listening to, but at least you're going to make the life of the attacker much harder, or it's not going to be that easy to find that information out. So on Windows systems, what you need to do, you need to edit the registry to change the listening port of RDP. And what you need to do, you would go to, you open the registry, you go to local machine, you go to systems, CurrentControlSet, control, terminal server, Windows stations, and then RDP. When you get to RDP, you're going to have an option to change the port number, as you can see right here. The port number, the default port is 3389. So in order for you to change that, you would double click on it and then you change the, if you know the hex value, you could do it. But you could do the same thing if you change the decimal value. So you could change that, for instance, to 3398 or any other port that is not being used by your system. So that's something that you have to at least become aware of, like what ports are being used on your system. And remember, ports are attached to services and then the services to applications. So if you go through the applications or services that you're using, you're going to be able to know whether that port is open at any given time. You could do a netstat, or if it will be open at another time by looking at the applications and services on your system. So you can click on OK. Now, when you do that, you have to restart the RDP service or reboot the computer. The reason for that is because now that we have made the change, if we do netstat -a one more time, you are going to see that the system is still listening on 3389, even though if we come here, you're going to notice that it says that the remote desktop port is 3398. So the mismatch is just simply because you have to restart the service. So I'm going to do that right now. Let me see if I can do that from here. So let me come here to MMC. I'm going to do computer management, or you could go directly to services. Services and applications, and then I'm going to come to remote desktop service. Okay, so there's let me see if I go to netstat, if I'm listening on the new port. Okay, so you can see it right here, 3398. Now, on the previous video and in this example, as I mentioned to you before, I was able to exploit the RDP service with Hydra to come up with the password for a user account, as you can see here. Now, if I try to run this one more time, as you can see in these sections in the syntax, I'm pointing to 3389 because that is the default port of RDP, and that's what any attacker would do by default, right? So let me execute this command and see what happens. Now the command is going to fail because it is trying to connect to a port that is not opened anymore. So let's wait for that to finish. Now, while that's happening, there's something else you have to keep in mind. As you could see, the command failed right here. Now that RDP is listening to a new port, it's listening on 3398 instead of 3389. When you are ready to establish an RDP session to that computer, you have to specify the port. So for that, let me bring another computer so I don't get away from this screen. So in this case, I have this Windows 11 computer that I'm going to connect from to this computer that I just changed the listening RDP port number to 3398. So if I just leave the connection as it is by default, the connection is going to fail, right? It's going to go through that and it's going to time out because it is trying to connect to a port that is not longer open. Now, the way that you need to what you need to do to connect to it, you need to specify the port. And in this case, we're going to do 3398 and then click on connect. So what's going to happen is that at this moment, the connection is going to fail still because we don't have a firewall rule for RDP listening on port 3398. The default rule for RDP, if we come here to firewalls, right here, if we go down to RDP, system moves. So right here, if we go to the remote desktop, right, TCP in, you're gonna see that the default port, or the port that is listening to, is 3389. But we changed the default port from 3389 to 3398. So what we need to do is create an inbound rule in the firewall, and you go there, and then you come here, and it's gonna be a simple port rule for this, and then you're gonna do 3398. You apply the rules, and then you have to name it. I'm just gonna name it something simple that is gonna pop up in the top. And I'm gonna finish. So right now we have created an inbound rule that is gonna allow connections from my any computer, pretty much. In this case, from this computer to this computer over 3398. And not only this computer, any computer that knows, like what IP address and port it should be connecting to. So it's not going to be like a super secret, but it's going to be something that is going to help you improve the security measures in your system. So once we do that, let's try connecting one more time. And as you can see now, I am prompted to enter the username and password for that remote computer now that we have created the firewall rule. The other thing that you can do to improve the security of your system when running RDP, and again, in this case, remember, I'm talking about simple configurations. I'm not talking about like IPS, IDS, network monitoring, stuff like that, just what you have out of the box in Windows. What you can do here, you can also create an access control list. So if you open the firewall rule that you have, and then you go to remote IP addresses, and you can say only these IP addresses are going to be allowed to connect over RDP to these computers. So you can come here and type the source IP address that you want to connect from. So 172.16.5. I don't know what the IP address of this device is. Oh, 100.2.10. So once you do that, you're gonna like add another layer of security of only allowing that specific IP address or any device with that specific IP address to establish the connection over RDP. If I click connect, I should connect, right? But if I change that, then let me come back here and change this to something else. Let's say to 11. That connection is gonna get rejected. And the other thing that is nice to do if you wanna do that is limiting the user accounts that are gonna have access to the RDP group. By default, any user account in the administrators group is gonna have access to it. But if you have regular users, you're going to see that there is a remote desktop user that you're going to add to it. So if you add any of your users, and again, any of the local users, because right here, these are local computers, they're not part of a domain. If you add any of these users, only those users and anybody in the administrator groups is going to be able to connect to RDP on your remote computer. So this is something simple. These are things that you can do right out of the box, and honestly, they are best practices. I would advise you to please do not leave your RDP connection wide open to anybody on the web. If you can, limit that either by source IP address or by users, or add more advanced configurations to it. You can set up a firewall and a whole bunch of things that can be done at any other time. If you liked this video, all I ask for you is to click on the like button, subscribe to my channel, and hey, leave a nice comment in there. Or if you have a question, you could type it in there, and I have to be honest, I'll do my best to try to answer. I don't always get to the comments. I have another life besides creating YouTube videos, but I try my best to help you in a way I can. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next video.